Record. All right, we are recording. Take it away.
All right, we have been having a conversation with Baylee Bessingpas, who has been working as a Minnesota GreenCorps member for the last year or so, since October, she has just told us. And we're going to hear about the work that she's been doing at the National Loon Center throughout her service term and exploring the common loon's ecology, relationship with water, which is what, of course, we're all about, and discuss population-wide threats to loons. So Baylee says that she has been able to connect with over 3,000 people just in the past, 11 months or so, about loons, lakes, and freshwater stewardship, which by itself is, I would say, quite an accomplishment. And I'm really interested to hear about what her takeaway is on that aspect of her work as well. Baylee has pursued a degree and came away with a degree from the University of Minnesota in fisheries, wildlife, and conservation biology. And she is especially interested in, believe it or not, community ecology, responses to anthropogenic change, and bridging the gaps between science, management, and public connection to nature. Baylee, it is great to have you with us. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. Well, yeah, as Mark just said, my name is Baylee. I am the Minnesota GreenCorps member at the National Loon Center right now. And I am going to share a little bit more about the work that I've been doing and then share a little bit more about the real star of the show, loons, and talk about their relationship with water. So let's see here. Oop. A little flag. Okay. So as a little primer here, this is just kind of a written summary of what I just said that we're going to talk about. So let's get into it. A little background context on the National Loon Center. So we are a nonprofit located in Cross Lake, Minnesota. I'll jump to this map quick for those of you who aren't familiar with Cross Lake. Cross Lake is part of the Whitefish chain of lakes, which is a connected area of 14 lakes in northwestern Crow Wing County. I'll hop back here. The National Loon Center was founded in 2017 with the mission to serve as a national leader in advancing loon research, freshwater research, education, and conservation. So we have sort of a three-tiered approach to what we do here. We want to learn about loons, learn about lakes. We want to share what we've learned with other people. And we want to take action on these things that we've learned and turn it into conservation actions. Some of the different programs and research initiatives we have going on right now, probably our most well-known one is the Stewardship Guided Pontoon Tours. We have a pontoon that we have docked out on Cross Lake in the recreation area by the dam, for those of you familiar with the area. And we take people out, usually 2 trips, Tuesday through Saturday, and we give them a chance to observe the loons around the lake, learn about them while watching them in the fields. And we also get to see a lot of real life examples of some of the threats to loons that we talk about, some of the conservation actions that we can take to help loons. And it's just a really pleasant time to be out on the water and enjoying the beautiful place we live. We have an annual Loons and Lakes Festival, which is a combination of guided paddles, more boat tours, some bird walks, all sorts of fun events. And then there is a loon fair that happens on the Saturday. And that is going to be a collection of vendors and exhibitors who are generally conservation or stewardship oriented from around the state of Minnesota. That usually happens the last weekend in June every year. We do a workshop series about our Share Our Shoreline initiative, and that's kind of our stewardship piece of things. We help people engage with those topics at a deeper level and let them head out well equipped to make great decisions in their own lives that positively affect loons and lakes. We do a lot of youth education and outreach programs. That's a lot of what I've been working on in my service term. We've got a junior loon biologist program for kids 7 to 12. We have the Future Lake Leaders program, which is an experimental program that we've created in partnership with the Bogonegishig School on the Leech Lake Reservation. That's designed to teach Indigenous youth through the lens of their own culture about land stewardship, water stewardship, and how we can connect with our lakes and our loons and bring that stewardship ethic into the future. We do a lot of classroom visits to schools in the area. We travel throughout Minnesota to do larger school events and festivals. The big research programs we have going on right now are the Mortality Project that we are now partnering with the DNR on, as well as the University of Minnesota. We are trying to establish a Minnesota-specific set of data that illuminate the reasons that loons are dying. So we send the carcasses down for necropsy, and hopefully, I believe in the next year or two is when we're planning on fully analyzing all of the carcasses we've collected and getting something published. We monitor loon productivity on the whitefish chain as well as a few other lakes in the area. We maintain and deploy some artificial nesting platforms. We participate in a lot of water quality monitoring, and the Loon Center facilitates loon research grants in partnership with the Ricketts Conservation Foundation. And those go to support people doing loon research across the range of not only the common loon, but the other 4 species of loons as well. So we already touched on where we're located. So currently, the National Loon Center is housed in a temporary facility in the Cross Lake Town Square, but we are in the process of constructing this beautiful permanent exhibit. It's going to have a lot of these really neat, interactive, immersive exhibits focusing on different parts of the loon's life. It is going to be a thoughtfully designed facility with near net zero emissions. We had a lot of geothermal bore wells drilled this summer. So we will have geothermal energy and there will be solar panels as well. So as green of a facility as we have been able to design. Getting a little bit into what I specifically have been doing at the Loon Center. So these are some photos from throughout my service term. Those youth education initiatives that I talked about before, I have gotten to help coordinate, plan, and execute a lot of those. Some of these are a little bit more of a lecture and activity style event. So in the upper left there, that is the Chain of Lakes Water Festival that happens at St. Ben's College in the St. Joseph area. And we had 4th graders from the whole school district come in and rotate through our station as well as many other stations. And we talked to them just kind of the quick spiel on loons and stewardship. What are loons? Why do we care about them? How do they connect to our lakes? And what can we do to keep them healthy? We've had the opportunity to table a lot of youth-oriented events. That picture on the upper right is from Critter Fest at the Science Museum of Minnesota. That was one of my favorite events of the year. It was super fun, and we got to connect with a lot of kids and adults who were just coming to celebrate their love of and interest in animals. We also have done a few youth expo type events, and we try to bring as many interactive components as possible to get the kids engaged. And I am a big fan of kids' artwork. So any opportunity we have to incorporate crafts, that is one of my favorite things to do with the kids. The lower left is a Loons and Lakes Jeopardy game that I created, and these are 8th graders here. They got very competitive with each other and enjoyed competing with their knowledge about loons and lakes. And the lower right photo is from the Loons and Lakes Festival that happened the last weekend in June. And this is the Loon Games section. So what you see these people racing for is the Are You Faster Than a Loon activity, where we time them against a loon for the time it takes a loon to take off from the water. Let's wait for my slides to catch up here. So in addition to the youth outreach, oh, I'm really lagging behind. Okay, so the adult education and outreach, it's kind of a similar spread to the youth activities, but obviously more targeted towards adults. I helped organize a shoreline cleanup for Earth Day, and we were able to remove over 140 pounds of trash from public spaces around the Brainerd-Baxter area. We run Loons and Lakes trivia events. Those are always a really fun educational initiative. We do lots of presentations for lake associations or community groups like churches or local clubs like Rotary and Kiwanis. A lot of tabling events, the Brainerd Lakes Home Show, the there's a large event that happens in Pine River every year called Back to Basics that we always table at and sometimes have workshops at. I also started a Share Our Shoreline blog series for the Loon Center where we get to talk about these different Share Our Shoreline or those stewardship topics and take a deeper dive and have a little bit more of a narrative exploration of these topics, which some people like short form information and some people like long form information. So we're trying to have a little bit more of a mix of those options to complement different learning styles. I also got to guide on the stewardship a lot, that pontoon that we were talking about that does the tours around Cross Lake and sometimes deeper into the Whitefish chain. That's definitely one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do. It's such a special experience to see people make those connections to the landscape around them in real time and see the joy that loons do bring people and see how people take that joy and turn it into a dedication to recreating and living their lives in a way that benefits those animals. Try to maybe close out of the slides here and reopen them and see if that helps with the lagging.
Yeah, that sounds good. Take your time.
Sometimes if you turn off your camera too, that can help. The
Okay.
camera can take up a lot of bandwidth. I also just saw your battery saver come on about a minute ago, so wanted to make sure you
Thanks. You know, I
have your power
will
cord
plug in
available.
real quick.
Yeah, I don't want to lose you.
Thanks for the heads up.
Sure thing.
All right, that did seem to pick things up a little bit. Hopefully that stays true. Another big component of my GreenCorps service was designing some sort of education event that we can have in our rotation with scouts. And this looked like 2 events this year. We organized a Scouts BSA Merit Badge Day. So this is for the kids who are a little bit older. This is going to be 5th grade through seniors in high school. And we got the kids out to the Loon Center. We had part of the program happen out on the boat, and we had part of the program happen at the recreation area / campground area. And the scouts were able to earn 2 merit badges, one in environmental science and one in bird study. And this was a very information intensive day to get 2 full merit badges, but some of the topics we covered were wastewater management, visual and auditory bird identification, pollinators, endangered species, and we did have a shoreline restoration site right there at the recreation area, which was a perfect place to teach about pollinators and endangered species, and also bird adaptations. It was a really fun, really successful event. We had full registration. We had 30 kids and about 20 to 25 adults there. So it was really successful, and we're super excited to continue doing that in years to come. You can see in the middle of the photos there, the Scouts district we worked with made these little celebratory badges for the Merit Badge Day, and we were so excited about those. We thought they turned out really, really cool. For our Cub Scouts program, it was a little bit more of a typical structured program where there was a presentation component and then a group activity component. The Cub Scout event, we had, I think we had almost 90 kids at that event. There were a lot of little kids running around, and those Cub Scouts are going to be the K through 4 age range. But the Cub Scouts programming, we didn't have anything that was Scouts oriented before my term. And now we've got a really strong foundation to build off of in the future and continue offering these events and expanding them. Another big component of my project was developing classroom toolkits / a sort of Loons and Lakes curriculum. And the goal for this project was to have these sets of lessons that are targeted for different age ranges that meet state standards and national standards. They come with lessons plans. So the goal is to teach these kids things that they are already required to learn, but doing so through the lens of loons and lake stewardship and just learning ecology through the example of aquatic ecosystems. And we were really excited about this idea because we think that having a sense of place and a strong connection to where you're living is so important. So while these could be used by anybody anywhere, they definitely are targeted a little bit more towards kids who are growing up in the Northwoods and in places that do have breeding common loons. So this was a really big component of my project that I don't think will be fully realized by the end of my GreenCorps term. But for each set of ages, there's lessons including what is a loon, loon life cycles, lake ecosystems, loon research and conservation, and loons in culture. And Loons in Culture is designed to tie in a humanities perspective to loons with particular emphasis on Indigenous cultures and just help kids understand that we've existed alongside loons for such a long time. And there are so many different ways that people have connected with them throughout history. And kind of encouraging the kids to think about their personal connections to loons, what they've learned, what that means to them, how they feel about it. So that lesson comes with a lot of really fun activities that are kind of designed for creative expression and reflection on human connections. Some kind of odds and ends of my GreenCorps term. The National Loon Center initiated a partnership this year with the Minnesota United Football Club, and their goalkeeper, Drake Callender, came out and visited us. I helped guide a tour, a junior loon biologist tour with Drake on board, and helped plan for the visit logistics and the video content. Drake and his family were very down to earth, and it was very fun to have them visit the Loon Center and trade the soccer pitch for the lake for a day. I have participated in a lot of community science projects as well. I've taken quite a few aquatic invasive species trainings and participated in a lot of early detection monitoring. Those pictures down below, that is us we're specifically looking for starry stonework because that is the largest concern in the whitefish chain, but obviously keeping our eyes open for any invasives that might be present. I got to help with some winter wildlife tracking surveys, and this spring I participated in some secretive marsh bird surveys that were so much fun and such a cool way to get out in the wetlands and experience birds. This summer, as the loons have returned and are living their lives and trying to raise families, I've gotten to participate in a lot of loon monitoring. Part of that has been helping with the artificial nesting platforms that the Loon Center maintains. And a lot of that has been weekly monitoring of different loon territories in the area. And that is in conjunction with the Minnesota DNR and USGS. It is the project that they started with the settlement from the Deepwater Horizon lawsuit. And their component of that project has been initiating a study of the way that loons use artificial nesting platforms. So it's a paired survey design where there are territories with artificial nesting platforms and adjacent territories without them. So kind of comparing how loon pairs do in those different territories when a nesting platform is or is not present. So kind of shifting away from my personal contributions and activities the last year, we are going to talk a little bit more about loons themselves. So loons are a group of migratory aquatic birds that live in the Northern Hemisphere. They are in their own order and their own family and their own genus. So they are pretty unique. Something a lot of people don't know about loons is that they are most closely related to penguins, much, much, much more closely than they're related to something like a duck or a goose than a swan. All 5 species of loons breed in freshwater lakes or wetlands and winter in oceans or large lakes. Another pretty cool thing that all the loons share is pretty equivalent parental investment in young. So both the parents contribute equally to raising those chicks at every stage. All of the loons are primarily piscivores, but they're not obligate piscivores. They also will eat things like crayfish, snails, frogs, and some insects. One of the loon nesting platforms I was monitoring this year, they didn't have a successful nest there, but once the loons had left, there were dragonfly wings all over the nesting platform. So this pair apparently was really enjoying eating the bodies of dragonflies, which is pretty cool to see. The common loon, this is what we have in Minnesota. This is our beloved Minnesota state bird. And just kind of a brief summary of some loon statistics. They are almost 3 feet long. They're about 30 inches. Their wingspan's about 5 feet. They weigh 7 to 13 pounds, so about as much as a small to mid-sized cat. And that's really heavy for a bird of this size. Something pretty unique about loons is that they have solid bones. They're very well adapted to swimming, fishing, and diving. And those solid bones help them do that versus birds designed for light, agile flight that are going to have hollow air pockets in their bones. They're long-lived at about 20 to 30 years on average. They fly up to 75 miles per hour despite their large size. So they have to flap those wings really fast. There's no coasting on the thermals for loons. They have to flap the whole time, but they are still fast. They can dive to depths up to 250 feet, and they can stay underwater for up to 5 minutes. This map on the right, in the orange, you can see the breeding range of the loon. So you can see it dips down into Minnesota. For states in the lower 48, we've got the most area that's suitable for loons. And you can see their winter range in the blue. Perfect summer habitat for a loon is cold, deep, clear, large lakes with a diversity of fish species and a lot of available natural shorelines. So that's going to ensure that they have the food resources they need and the nesting resources that they need. Over on the side, you can see a picture of a yellow perch and a cisco. In the whitefish chain, yellow perch and cisco are 2 of the most common fish species that the loons are going to be eating. They're erratic swimmers, and those cisco are really, really densely nutritious. So that's something the loons are going to eat a lot before they migrate. One of the most common misconceptions about loons is that they mate for life. They do not, in fact, mate for life. They're monogamous within the breeding season. And if a pair is really successful together, there's a good chance they will mate for multiple seasons, but it's not a lifelong pair bond like we'd see in something like cranes or geese. So some rough population numbers. It's a little bit hard to evaluate this and account for all of the juvenile loons that are going to be spending the first 3 to 5 years of their lives in their winter range out at sea. But we estimate that there's about 780,000 globally, about 500,000 of which are in North America, and about 12,000 of which are in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, we've got about 2% of the North American population of loons, and we have more than any state except Alaska. I did want to touch a little bit on loons in Ojibwe or Anishinaabe culture. The Anishinaabe word for loon is Hmong. And Hmong is one of the 7 traditional dudems or clans, which is the system of kinship and governance traditionally for Anishinaabe people. And the loon is actually one of the clans that was a leader. The loons and the cranes led cooperatively, with the loons mostly focusing on diplomatic relations. So that's pretty cool and something that we always like to bring up in our programming, kind of connecting with that loons and culture lesson to just share how loons have been important to different groups of people over time. Loons are a migratory species. They begin migrating to their wintering grounds, usually in August when those chicks are fully fledged, which means that they're fully independent. You can see on this map on the left some of the migratory routes that these different regions of loon populations take. Here in Minnesota, the majority of our loons are going to winter on the Gulf Coast of Florida. So just like somebody's grandma that might be a snowbird and head to the coast of Florida for the winter, loons love that lifestyle. That is generally what we're going to see them doing as well. Threats to loons. The loon population, I will say, based on the Minnesota DNR's annual monitoring efforts, in Minnesota overall, we're looking pretty stable, but we are seeing a decline in reproductive success, and there are a lot of human-caused threats to loons. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through these here, but we've got a lot of different diseases and pathogens that can affect loons. Environmental toxins are a huge problem. Fishing line entanglement can obviously be a big problem in a place where fishing is such an integral component of our culture. Human recreation fits right in there as well. So that's going to be things like watercraft collisions, loons getting spooked off of their nests because people are crowding them. There is a problem with habitat loss. Obviously, in Minnesota, we are seeing shoreline development increase every year, and that is going to lead to a suite of problems. The most obvious of which is that the loons are going to lose that natural shoreline they need to nest on. Impaired water quality from a lot of those environmental toxins and also from aquatic invasive species is a problem. Oil spills fits into that as well, and climate change. So on the right side here, we can see the projected range shift of the common loon over the coming decades. And based on current models, by 2050, there's only going to be a few breeding pairs of loons in the very far northern reaches of the state. That's obviously not set in stone, but based on the information we have right now, that is what the outlook is looking like. So common loons are really widely recognized as an indicator species, which is a species whose presence, absence, or abundance reflects the health and quality of its specific ecosystem. That is one of the reasons that we see loons so well represented in research, because they're really great environmental indicators. They live a long time, they're a top predator, they nest on natural shorelines, and they're a visual predator, so they need clear water to hunt. So for healthy loon populations, we need healthy lakes. And for healthy lakes, we need healthy watersheds. So really anything that does happen within a watershed is ultimately going to trickle down and affect the loon. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into these specific facets of water quality and water issues that affect loons. I certainly don't have enough time to go through this in extensive detail. There is a massive body of research on loons, and a lot of the information can be a little bit conflicting or contradictory. So I've done my best here to summarize the literature and give you guys a little view into how these water quality issues affect loons. Like we established, loons are visual predators. If they want to catch fish, they're going to need to see them first. So when the water is more turbid or less clear, that is going to result in less efficient foraging. This is a big concern with changing climatic conditions, these increasingly frequent and severe precipitation events, especially during the height of breeding season for loons, when maybe they're on the nest or the chicks are young and still growing really quickly. Those large rainfall events are really going to impact water clarity and make it difficult for the loons to catch enough food. This is also another big concern from nutrient pollution and eutrophication. Algal blooms cause a lot of problems, obviously, but one of them for loons is definitely going to be that the water is less clear and it's more difficult to catch fish. When we're thinking about nutrient pollution, these lakes that the loons prefer to nest in, these beautiful glacially formed, deep, cold, large, clear lakes, these lakes under eutrophication are not going to be as productive for loons, and we're going to see the loons become less successful in those environments. A great example of this is Iowa. Iowa had a loon population for millennia. And as Iowa became developed, particularly with agriculture, that agriculture runoff combined with the warming waters led to the Iowa lakes no longer being suitable for loons. And now it's been, I believe, about 75 years since we've seen loons nesting in Iowa. Another way that nutrient pollution is going to impact loons is through food web disruption. As a top predator, anything that happens at any level of the food web is going to affect a loon. So loons and aquatic invasive species do have a pretty close relationship. There's some sort of obvious effects, like habitat loss. If a shoreline is overtaken by invasive Phragmites or purple loosestrife, those plants are going to be less suitable than the native emergent and shoreline vegetation for nesting. AIS can also create physical and visual barriers to feeding, and we're going to see food web disruption. But the big issue that I want to talk about with AIS is zebra mussels, because zebra mussels sort of create this perfect suite of conditions that threaten loons. So the zebra mussels, they filter plankton out of the water and they deposit their waste on the lake bed, and that reduces the amount of oxygen in the water towards the bottom of the lake, creates these anoxic conditions. In these anoxic conditions, more bacteria are more actively methylating mercury. So they're taking this biologically unavailable form of mercury that's been deposited in the atmosphere and then gets into the water. And they are going to turn that mercury into a biologically available form, methylmercury, that can then travel up the food chain. So we're going to have more mercury in these zebra mussel systems. And this has been recently illustrated for us in the Blinick et al. 2021 study from the University of Minnesota, where they showed fish tissue mercury being 72 to 150% higher in zebra mussel infested lakes. And they were testing walleye and yellow perch specifically, and both of those are species that the loons consume. Avian botulism is a pretty nasty disease affecting loons, especially in the Great Lakes. And these anoxic conditions, they allow the Clostridium botulinum bacteria to increase toxin production. So when there's oxygen-rich conditions, these bacteria are still present, but they're not producing as much toxin. However, under these anoxic conditions, when we do see higher levels of toxin production, the zebra mussels are then going to filter out and concentrate that toxin. It's going to biomagnify, and then that toxin is going to pass through the food chain and end up in loons. And that's when we see avian botulism outbreaks. And this isn't just a problem for loons. This is a problem for a lot of water birds, especially ones that stop over in the Great Lakes during migration. So loons and mercury. If I wanted to talk to you about all of the studies that have been done on loons and mercury, we would be here all week. So I do have a lot of slides here, but I'm going to try to get through them pretty quickly. Loons are widely recognized as the primary avian indicator of mercury's effects on freshwater ecosystems. So loons are an indicator species for a lot of different specific environmental effects, but mercury is the one that has been studied the most. And the reason they're such a good species for understanding these effects are that biomagnification factor. As top predators, that methylmercury has continued to amplify from a little fish to a slightly larger fish to a slightly larger fish to a slightly larger fish. And then it gets into a loon, and it's had all of this time to increase in concentration. And the bioaccumulation. Loons live for a really long time. It's not unheard of for a loon to be in its 40s. So that's a lot of decades for these contaminants to build up over time. and start reaching different thresholds for the loons to experience adverse effects. The other reason loons make great indicator species is that they're very territorial. So during the breeding season, they're going to be sticking to a pretty specific relegated area of the lake. So they are very representative of site-specific contaminant levels. So not only do they represent the entire body of water they're in, they represent smaller subsections of that body of water. So in the Northeast, that's where most of this research has been done. Because this was an area of bustling industry for so long, there's a lot of deposition of atmospheric mercury, and the acidic conditions of the lakes mean that there's a lot of methylation of mercury happening as well. Despite this robust body of research on loons, we still don't fully understand how mercury affects them. Basically, kind of a summary of all of this stuff that I'm about to tell you is that mercury poisoning is not going to kill adult loons outright, but it's going to make it a little bit harder for them to do the things that they need to do to take care of themselves. And it's going to make it considerably harder for them to successfully hatch and raise chicks. So female loons, when they have a high level of mercury in their system, which typically is going to come from their diet, they can pass that to their embryos when they lay eggs, which is pretty interesting. And Kevin Keno, he is a researcher that's done a lot of different projects on mercury in loons, and he's even done some experimental hatching of loon eggs in captivity. This is one of the only times this has been done. Loons are very, very difficult to keep in captivity. And that is one of the things that makes this such a hard phenomenon to study and effectively assess. So some of the behavioral effects that we see, most of these are tied into reproductive effects. We see that this time spent by the adult loons incubating the nests drops the more methylmercury is concentrated in their blood. And any time that those loons spend off the nest, that opens the eggs up to cooling or heating excessively, and it opens them up to predation. There are a lot of animals that think loon eggs make a delicious snack, and that's why it's so important for those adults to stay on the nest. Another big change that we see is in the activity levels of adult loons. So we see this effect where at high methylmercury concentrations in the blood, the loons are spending less time engaged in high energy activities like feeding themselves, feeding their chicks, preening and maintaining their feathers, and defending their territory. So these really important but high energy behaviors, the loons seem to be a bit more lethargic when they have a lot of mercury in their system. We also see reduced chick feeding rates and less chicks riding the backs of adult loons. So these important things that keep the chicks safe and fed when they are young and vulnerable are impacted by mercury. We also see some developmental instability in loons that have higher blood concentrations of mercury. We see increased asymmetry between paired flight feather weights. And the more mercury there is, the more that asymmetry is obvious. And these are things that would make it structurally more difficult for these loons to be as strong as they need to be to migrate and to effectively defend their territories. Some more reproductive effects. Above a certain threshold, there's a pretty substantial 40 to 41% fewer fledged young versus breeding loons that have lower blood concentrations of mercury. So a 40% reduction is pretty substantial. And there is a threshold as well where total reproductive failure is predicted. It's predicted that these loons are not going to be able to hatch viable eggs or have a chick that survives very long at all. We also see elevated mercury makes smaller eggs. We see that elevated mercury makes chicks less responsive to threats. And these eggs take longer to hatch during the incubation period. These starred studies are those circumstances I was talking about where there was this experimental study done on captive loon eggs and then loon chicks that were actually injected with mercury, which is pretty fascinating and not something that will probably be done again, given how difficult it was to keep those loons. So loons and pH, this is really tied into a lot of things we've already talked about. Pretty much acidic lakes have more methylation happening, and that what we've noticed is that loon body size is smaller on acidic lakes and loon productivity is generally lower on acidic lakes. Another pretty big problem is that these more acidic lakes cause lead to break down more quickly, usually from lead fishing tackle, and that leads to more dissolved lead in the water column. In the Northeast, we do have a lot of really acidic lakes from the legacy of acid rain from industry. And despite making a lot of management and regulatory changes in the Northeast, we are still seeing these negative effects and these lakes that are heightened in acidity still to this day. This connection with pH is one of the reasons copper sulfide mining is going to be a concern for lake ecosystems in general and loons. During copper sulfide mining, the stuff that's the target is inside of sulfide-bearing ores. When these sulfide-bearing ores are exposed to water and air, sulfuric acid forms, and then the pH of the water drops and heavy metals leach into the water. So this is likely going to be an area of increased concern in Minnesota in the coming years. We don't have any studies that are specifically connecting copper sulfide mining to loons, but it seems pretty intuitive that having sulfuric acid in our waters would probably create issues for loons. So to briefly touch on oil spills, this is obviously more of an issue in marine waters. The main issues with oil spills immediately are going to be that the oil on the feathers leads to the loons being unable to properly insulate and ending up with hypothermia. Ingesting and inhaling the fumes leads to petroleum poisoning, and we've got this food chain connection where the loons are losing food. Long term, this is sort of an emerging body of research as well. These elevated levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs. These are going to reduce the overall body mass and red blood cell counts of loons, and they have the potential to be genotoxic, carcinogenic, and cause more reproductive impairment to the loons. I am going to skip through this. Beautiful graphic, though, from the Peruk paper in 2016. Jim Peruk's another very prolific loon researcher. Briefly touch on loons and chloride. Loons are adapted to salt water, so chloride's not something that's typically directly toxic to them, but it is something that is going to influence the food web, water clarity, and natural lake processes occurring throughout the year. This is a really interesting study that is ongoing from New Hampshire. The Loon Preservation Committee is routinely testing non-viable eggs that they retrieve from field sites for PFAS, PCBs, DDEs, and organochlorine pesticides. And in 2021, when they did the study for the first time, every single one of those contaminant classes was present in 100% of the eggs, and 60% of the eggs met or exceeded the estimated thresholds for adverse effects. And the loon-specific effects of these contaminants are not known. Again, it's really, really hard to simulate lab experiments with loons because they do so poorly in captivity, but suggested reproductive impairments and some immune suppression. So some common threads that we can see from all of this. All of these water issues connect in these ways. Loons need clear water to find food. Environmental contaminants end up in the water and have influence on loon survival and reproductive success. And because of loons' trophic position as tertiary consumers, when any part of that food web is disrupted, it is going to affect food availability for loons. And just to reiterate, none of these threats occur in a vacuum. They all are connected and they all play off of each other. And that's one of the reasons it can be kind of hard to parse out which specific phenomena are causing specific effects on loons. Some brief kind of share our shoreline things, some things that the average person can consider to keep our loons and lakes healthy while recreating in Minnesota and beyond. You can fish loons safe. Lead fishing tackle, lead poisoning, that's still the #1 cause of mortality in loons nationwide. So you can switch to non-toxic options and don't cast your line directly where a loon is swimming. You can watch your wake. Be mindful of no wake zones, keep your eyes open, and slow down near loons and shorelines. We can give wildlife space. We generally recommend that you stay at least 100 feet away from loons, 200 feet if they're on a nest, and use optics to help you get a better view. Some of our loons are pretty brave in the state, so sometimes you are keeping that appropriate distance of 100 feet away and a loon chooses to approach you. That is fine. That's nothing to worry about. We just want to make sure we give them that choice. We can follow Minnesota laws and recommendations and clean, drain, and dry gear between water bodies to prevent the spread of various AIS. And we can landscape for loons. If we're lucky enough to have shoreline property or have access to shoreline property, we can maintain a vegetative buffer of native plants, and that is going to make a huge difference for loons and the health of the lake. So that was a lot of information, but that is the end of what I have for you today.
Thank you so much, Baylee. That was incredibly interesting.
Thank
Oh,
you.
we had someone raise their hand, maybe for a question, or maybe they
Yeah.
were just trying to applaud. But if
Yeah.
folks have questions, please put those in the chat. And it looks like we do have one.
Awesome.
Does the National Loon Center do any collaboration with Loon Watch at the Sigurd Olson Institute in Ashland, Wisconsin?
That's a great question. So at this time, I don't think we have like any regular established partnership with them, but I do think that they represent the Sigurd Olson Institute on various like loon stewardship committees and working groups. So I think we do kind of tangentially partner with them.
All right. Just waiting on questions here. Lots of
Well, Baylee, this is Mark. I
oh yeah, go ahead.
thought I knew about loons until I just saw your presentation. This is just a fabulous way to communicate what is going on environmentally with loons and what people can relate to. And I'm thinking that if you can do 10% of what you just showed us in terms of interacting with the public at the Loon Center, this has got to be just very, very effective in communicating and educating people about about water quality issues and problems. And I'm kind of wondering if you can just reflect on that just for a minute or so about how that experience has been and how you feel like this is connecting with people to give them a greater sense of why these environmental problems are so important.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. That's very nice. And I guess second of all, so yeah, kind of like we were chatting about before the presentation started here, I think in Minnesota, everybody does have some connection to the lake. Maybe it's loons, maybe it's fishing, maybe it's you used to sit on the dock and read poems with your grandma. I don't know. But everybody has some personal connection. And what we're really trying to do is to find that connection and help people see that thing as more than an inanimate object or a resource, and help people kind of see the whole lake ecosystem as a living, breathing thing that it connects not only with every other natural part of the system, but also every other unnatural part of the ecosystem. So these things that we love our lakes for so much, for being refreshing in the summertime, for housing the fish we like to eat, for housing the loons we like to watch, all of these things, like there really is no way to disconnect them. And I think when we help people see that, kind of using the loons as an emblem or a mascot of that, I think it has been a really great unifier of people. I mean, it's nice that loons are a pretty nonpartisan thing. It's pretty easy to unite around loons as something that everybody can understand and appreciate. And it has been really incredible to connect with so many people with loons as the central touchstone of that. Like we really have, we talk to all kinds of people, some people who are very, very, very pro loon to the point that maybe they're anti eagle because eagles eat the loon chicks. So, and then we come from people who are of a little bit more extractive of a mindset, maybe, and they kind of just see the lake for what it can give them. So it's sort of just meeting people where they're at, figuring out what specifically they care about, and figuring out how we can tie that to the overall health of the lake ecosystem. And another thing that I think we try to touch on a lot is keeping these lakes not only healthy for us right now, but preserving them so that our kids and grandkids can have the same incredible experiences with lakes that we've been lucky enough to have ourselves. And we have seen people be very receptive to this messaging. We've seen a lot of people get involved with shoreline restoration efforts. We've seen a lot of kids that have committed to being the loon lookout on their boat in the summertime. We've seen families make the switch to non-lead fishing tackle. So I do think like giving people sort of these small actionable things that they can do to, you know, give back to the lake that gives us so much, I think that does make a difference for people.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. So many thank yous, so many great presentations. Very impressive work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I mean, if you enjoyed this today, this truly is just the tip of the iceberg. So come down to the Loon Center in Cross Lake or up to the Loon Center in Cross Lake, especially once we open our permanent facility in 2027. I mean, there's so much to learn. There's so much we know, there's so much that we have yet to learn, and we love nothing more than to yap about it. So please come visit us, and we would love to talk to you more.
Fantastic plug. All right, I will do one last call for questions here. Oh, yes, Joanne. No, they were trying to applaud.
I've been there.
Yeah, the applause is deafening. So
Yeah.
nicely
Yes.
done.
Yeah.
Thanks,
I have a
folks. I
question.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you feel about using things like aluminum sulfate to clear the water to get, or I think there are other products that are different that can increase water clarity.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. I would say that I don't know enough about that to have a well-informed opinion. My area of expertise is much more in ecology than it is in environmental science. So that's something that I'd be interested in hearing more about. But I will bring up that, so for example, zebra mussels make water really clear, but they do also have these other ecosystem impacts that sort of outweigh the benefits of water clarity. So that's something that I would want to consider with potential solutions for making water clearer is what are the trade-offs?
It's never that simple. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Okay, and we did have a question. Where is the Cross Lake Loon Center and the schedule? Do you?
Yes.
Oh, there's
I
a
can-
website right on there, your slide right there.
Yep. So www.nationalloonscenter.org. That can give you all of the logistical information that you need about the Loon Center. But in quick summary, we are about 30 minutes north of the Brainerd Lakes area, and our pontoon schedule right now is on Tuesdays, we have junior loon biologist and senior home tours. On Wednesday, we have research tours, which are a longer, more research oriented tour. And on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 8:30 and 10 o'clock, we have our general public tours. I will say that the tours, they do require registration in advance. They are free, but they do tend to fill up. So if you're interested, something you can do on our website is sign up for what we call the Hoot, which is sort of our bi-monthly newsletter. And the Hoot is the first place you're gonna see when registration opens for the boat rides. And getting your name in there early is definitely helpful. But we do have some openings throughout September.
Awesome. And I went and dropped that link in the chat, so that is there for
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, it is 9:59. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I think we can probably go ahead and wrap this one up for today. Baylee, thank you so much for spending your Thursday morning with us and teaching us all about loons. I think this was a very well attended and a lot of positive feedback from the water issues folks here this morning. So we just really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. Truly my pleasure. I'm happy to share the word about loons and lakes anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.
Thank you. You as well. Take care.